What's happening, people? Welcome to this week's episode of It's All Blakademik with me, your host, Jordan Jarrett-Bryan. Just another signpost to our website, blakademik.com. Go check it out. All of our content, podcasts, and a whole lot more is there to go and see and view. Also, we're across all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you're not following us across those platforms, please do so. And finally, we're on here, our channel now, so you might as well subscribe to our channel, Blakademik TV. Also, tell your mum, tell your dad, the postman, everybody around you as well. This week on the show, we have a discussion around the accountability within our community and who is failing more our young black people, government or our community itself. And to do so, I've got three fantastic guests with me on the panel this week. I've got here Azu Nkwachu, who feels that black people are too dependent on government. I've also got Jarrett-Bryan, who is a similar school of thought that there needs to be more accountability from within our community. And award-winning Emmanuel, who's award-winning business and careers coach. She's coming on the show this week, guys. I'm going to start with you, Arit. So within our community, if we take churches as an example, that has been often criticized as maybe not being as progressive as the wider world that it sits within, but also from a government's point of view, youth centres. There's a lot of youth centres have been closed over the last 5 to 10 years that have been affected large areas of the country where there are lots of black people, which has a knock-on effect for those black youths. First of all, do you feel that there needs to be more accountability on the wrongs that are going wrong in our community, or is there a wider problem with the government that's not serving our community correctly?
I think that the cuts do have an impact. Mm-hmm. If you think about things like Sure Start, which was set up by New Labour to help communities and people from economically disadvantaged groups to gain support, whether that's through childcare, through healthcare, through parenting classes. When there has been a withdrawal of that kind of support and people are then feeling the effects of that, then government has its role to play. I also think, however, that the community itself can do more for itself. When you talk about churches, I think churches do a lot within the community. We just don't talk about it a lot. So when you're looking at generally, when there's anything happening within the black community, it's of a negative perspective. Mm-hmm. So we don't celebrate our successes enough. So I know some churches, for example, KICC has an entire program that is dedicated to breaking educational barriers. So it takes young people to Oxford, to Cambridge, to large employers, so it raises their aspirations and runs an annual conference where it brings these schools, these institutions, these organizations together, and you've got young people talking to young people about their experiences. So it's like mentorship, but we don't talk about that. That's not celebrated enough, and it's not invested. We're not investing in that enough. So I think there is a balance. There's definitely accountability from a government perspective. There's a celebration perspective from ourselves, and there's also what more can we be doing for ourselves.
Azu, you've spent a lot of time, you're from Nigeria. Yeah. You have spent a lot of time living in Nigeria and a lot of time living in the UK as well. What's your perspective on young people in this country, and do you feel that within our community, we do expect too much of government to help and support young people live the prosperous lives we want them to live, or do you think there's more questions within our own community from within itself?
I think there's a lot of questions within our own community because, okay, let's do it like this. At least we know that the first ship that came in during the Windrush was in 1948. So at least there were black people in England in 1948. That's a long time to 2019 for black people to be in this community and adapt to this community. Regardless of the backgrounds, where we live today, we are in a community whereby we don't even control or own most of the things that affect us. Like for example, the image of the black man today, the successful black man is a rapper, boxer, or sportsman, athlete, or entertainer. You hear this lazy government solution, for example, to knife crime. They say, take them to a boxing gym. As if, what happened to black people being doctors, pilots, and so on and so forth? Why is every black man going down the route of being a sportsman or an artist? We don't even tell our own story. So that is even the beginning part of it. Now, regarding what the church is doing, that is not something that is celebrated in our community because that is not something that we see as success. If it's not something that has to do with being some sort of celebrity, we don't rate it. What happened to being an average everyday doctor who just goes to work and takes care of his family, which is the standard? You don't, not every white person who the so-called white middle class people are all celebrities, actors and whatnot. You just have the regular people doing regular jobs, taking care of their regular families.
So on the point of church, do you feel that the churches within our communities are having a good influence on young people, especially in consideration of the wider world and the wider country that we live in? Are the values of what black churches instill in young black people conducive to living in a white country?
I don't know much about black churches because I don't really subscribe to the whole, should I say, church lifestyle, if you know what I mean.
What do you mean?
Okay, I'll explain what I mean. I'll explain what I mean.
I'm a church girl.
There are people who go to church on Sunday, they are doing something on Tuesday in church. On Wednesday, they are this, they know their pastor's favorite color, what he likes for dinner. I don't do that. I turn up at church on Sunday, that's that, I go home.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So that's what I mean by the whole church lifestyle. But if, as a church, you're teaching people to be dependent, giving them the tools they need to be dependent and succeed, I'm happy with that. If as a church, you're feeding the mindset whereby people are raised to feel they are victims of life, regardless of whether it's a church, I'm 100% against that. Because, where you start in this life, not everybody starts on a level playing field. But at the end of the day, it's what you do with yourself that counts. No, I'm not here to deny slavery, I'm not denying racism exists and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, with the little we have, there is enough if you apply yourself to achieve something decent in your life. That is my belief.
I hear that. Shari, I know on the point of church again, what do you see in terms of influence on young people in the church? Is it a positive one, do you feel? In terms of, I suppose, gearing them up for what they're going to need to survive in Europe and in this country in particular?
I would say I think there's more an emphasis on trying to get people plugged into positive activities and things like that, yes, but I also feel as though it's almost as though the bar is set quite low, so just keep them out of trouble rather than actually doing more of what Eric said that KRCC is doing. Exactly, and I think that is really where we need to turn things around rather than just trying to stay above the crime or the violence or whatever is happening amongst so many young people. We need to actually be trying to get them to open their eyes to the possibilities of where they could be and what they could achieve as a community and as individuals as well. So I think that, there's lots of positive things that churches and other faith groups are doing for young groups within their communities. But I think that on the whole, we need to actually make the vision a lot bigger and a lot brighter.
If you're not in prison, you're doing well.
Yeah, if you're not on the streets and carrying a knife, then you're doing good. No, that's standard. And if we were not here and we were in an African country or a Caribbean country or something, then that wouldn't be the standard. I don't feel the standard would be to be a regular Joe that is looking after your family and adding impact to your community and having a good job. That's where the standard should be, not just that you're not meeting the negative stereotype.
And just to add more to that, there was a joke Chris Rock did once. He said, you have in the hood, so to speak, you have young black men bragging to their friends I've never been in jail, and that seems to be something to brag about. And he's like, no, you're not meant to be in jail. That is the standard, do you know what I mean? But moving on from that, going back sort of what the churches and, charities and so on and so forth are doing. But to me, the first point of socialization for anyone is the family. Yeah. I shouldn't really be looking up to my pastor for morals. My morals were given to me by my father and my mom.
I want to come back to the parents in just a moment. Let me bring you in, Ari. On the issue of community, do you still feel that the practice that it takes a village to raise a child is still in existence in our community, or is that something that is long gone?
I think it's going. I grew up in the Northeast, and the environment, yes, it was incredibly racist. It's the 80s. I don't need to paint you a picture of what it would have been like at that time. But what I liked about the North is that there is a sense of community. So I could come home from school and walk into somebody else's house and they would take care of me. I don't see that so much in London. I think it's very rare that people know their neighbours. So I think when you lose that community effect, that family effect, and you've got a lot of people who live quite far away from their families, and because of the cost of living in London, then generally people are working for longer. So whereas before you might have had a child and been supported by your mom and by your sisters or whatnot, then they're all having to work to earn a living too. So that has an impact.
Is that a bigger issue within the black community in particular? So that's a London problem.
Yeah.
Is it worse if you're black and in London?
I don't know whether it's worth or whether it's on par with other communities. I just think it is impacting families today. But just to pick up your point earlier about how black people are portrayed, I think one of the reasons is that we don't own the media, and we have to be very careful about not believing the hype. So generally when you see, like I said earlier, representation of black people, it is when they are doing something wrong. Like anyone, if you think about knife crime now, you may think it's a huge epidemic, but it is not. It is really, and if you think about, there's 1.2 million roughly around black people living in the UK, but 21 murders in 2017 were committed by young black men. It's not great. One murder is too many, but it is not an epidemic. But that is how it's kind of like a legacy of colonialism, of slavery, is black people are genetically violent. We're not able to control our own, and that's what the media perpetuates. So that's why you don't see the doctors and the solicitors and the professionals.
Is that not then the parents' role then to instill in their children that despite what's being shown on TV and in the media, which is a powerful force, I totally accept that, is it not then the parents' job to be saying, listen, to their young son or daughter, despite what you may see on television, I expect better from you, I expect this from you.
Yeah, but that's about you individually. This is where kind of individual responsibility comes from too, is that if you as a parent are starting to believe what you're saying, if you as a parent are starting to feel disenfranchised, then you will replicate that in your behavior. Do you know what I mean? So it depends on whoever has your ear has your life, is what my mum used to say. So who are you listening to? Who are you plugged into? So if it's the news, then yes, you're going to feel less than, because that's what they're telling you. You are less than. If you are whereas if you are educating yourself in other means, whether it's spiritually or podcast, whatever you're doing, then you're feeding your mind in a different way.
Okay.
So listen to who you're listening to.
Not with everything. So for example, you talk about our communities. Yes, the physical contact in our communities is, disappearing. But if you really look at it, our communities nowadays are moving online. People have friends whom they only speak with on the phone, or if you're a gamer, you have people whom you play your games with who probably are living God knows where. You've not met them. So the communities are sort of moving online. But regarding, like you said, watching the media and so on and so forth, no, your parents educate you. You don't have 2-year-olds watching the news. From a young age, it's the values your parents put into you, raising you up in society, that you go with. And then as you get older into your teenage years, then the media might come into it. But even at that point in time, growing up, when we were growing up and our friends turned up at our door, before you came into the house, my mom wanted to know who you were, who your dad was, what your parents did, before you came into the house. So where was the influences coming from? We have situations whereby today where young children are coming home with new trainers, let's not even go into that, coming and the parents don't say anything. And then 3 weeks down the line, he gets stabbed, then they start crying. Do you know what I mean?
Explain the link between what you're trying to say. Between...
So what I mean is, you have a young son who, as far as you are aware, doesn't have a job, and probably from the last time you bought him a trainer or phone or whatever, that these things are expensive. He turns up home with a new pair of trainers, whatever, that you haven't bought for him, and you don't ask, where is this coming from? until further down the line, you find out that maybe he's into crime or whatever, and then as a result, he's getting stabbed.
So you're saying that early intervention is not happening from a lot of parents in our community.
Yes.
And what's happening later on.
Yeah, your child shouldn't have the confidence to come home with expensive stuff you didn't buy for him and not be worried about you asking him a question. What's that all about? I've gotten on the bus in the night about 9 o'clock and I see school children still in their school uniform. That can't be right, because that tells me automatically that child hasn't gone home 9 o'clock at night. So where is the parent? How come you haven't seen your child at 9 o'clock at night and you're not concerned?
Do you think that parenting is an issue, Zuri, in terms of problems that young people in our community are facing later on? Is parenting the central and the biggest problem as to why they get to those lengths?
I think absolutely, to be perfectly honest. I didn't grow up in London, I grew up in Gloucester. And so I think there was definitely a lot more community. If my parents couldn't pick me up from school, then someone else's parents from church did, and things like that. And my parents did generally know where I was. And I would say the cost of living is a bit lower, so both my parents did work, but there was always someone that could watch us after school and stuff like that. So we had much more kind of social involvement. But I think it's really tricky because there's a lot of issues economically with people going for more food banks and people having to work 2 jobs on 0-hour contracts and stuff like that. And so when you do get work, you have to work. And so if that means that your kids are not being attended to until 9 o'clock at night, because you have to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads, then there's so many issues. I'm here as not the only one from my family, but my family that is here is in North London. I'm in South London. So if I was in a situation where I had no money coming in and it was just me and my kids, then I would need to do whatever I could do. And sometimes that means leaving them with people that you don't necessarily want to leave them with. And there's all kinds of different layers to what you're saying. I do agree with you, because I know that when I first came to London, I was just shocked at the number of kids that was out on the street at 10 o'clock at night and 11 o'clock at night or whatever. And I'm like, for me, that's crazy. Like, where are your parents? Why aren't you in someone's house? Why does nobody know where you are and stuff like that? So I completely understand and agree, but I think that there are so many extra layers, especially with what is going on economically and politically in this country, that is impacting all of those things.
Yeah, I agree. It's too simplistic to blame the parents without considering those issues. I mean, although I wasn't raised in London, I raised my daughter in London. I was that parent. I was the one where, you didn't sleep at other people's houses if I didn't know them. Before, for me, it was an open door policy. Bring your friends into my house, because if I can see them, I can see the home that they're coming from. So I think there is, and I raised my daughter on my own. So I think it is a challenge, and you do have to build that network. So I had a core network of people that I trusted, that if I needed to work late, I worked in TV, so I had to have a flexible kind of childcare setup. But I only had about 3 people who I relied on, and if I couldn't rely, if none of those people were available, then I didn't work. So there wasn't a time when my daughter wasn't looked after, but that's because that's the upbringing that I had. There was always somebody around. So the idea that she would just be on road at whatever, that in my mind just didn't work.
In their school uniform, because that's a critical point. No. A child can go home, see the parent, have lunch, and go out and do what they do. I'm not getting into. I'm talking about a child.
They haven't gone home.
They haven't gone home. That is the point I'm making. If your child hasn't gone home from school at 9 o'clock and you don't seem bothered, something is wrong.
Yeah,
I'm not saying children out on the street at 9 o'clock. I'm saying children out on the street at 9 o'clock in their school uniform.
But even for those kids that are in their school uniform out late at night, do you accept some of the reasons that Zuri and Jarrett have given as to why that may be the case?
That may be the case. And I mean, I don't want to go into that so much, but she said something here. She said when she was growing up, she had her parents, the mom and the dad, and one worked, one didn't work. If you decide to be a single parent, you should know that, you're already handicapped from the start.
No, hold on.
Yeah.
You already handicapped because
I didn't say that.
it's not
Both my
handicap.
parents were at home and both of them worked as well.
Okay.
But because they were both working, then that meant sometimes my mum worked an hour away, so she couldn't come and pick us up. My dad would be working and he might have a meeting that would come up, and so then somebody else would have to pick us up. And that was fine because I guess of the community that they grew up in as well. But what I am seeing is a lot of younger people who are having children and maybe they didn't grow up with that sense of social community or parents who were as responsible as mine. So now you have a generational issue. And people don't always just decide to be a single parent. Like, stuff happens. And if stuff happens to you and you're already in a vulnerable position because you don't have a strong family connection, or your family are the kind of people that you do not want around your kids at all, then you only have one or two other people that maybe you trust to look after your kids, or you might have people that you do trust, but they all work. And so the only time they could help you out is on the weekends. There are so many different factors. I think you have to come with
much more
a bit more
nuanced,
compassion because people are mostly trying their best, and I think that's where the community element of faith groups, charities, whatever, and where the government could step in, so that there used to be youth clubs and there aren't youth clubs. There used to be Sure Start groups. There aren't Sure Start groups anymore.
Are you not having the lack of youth provisions and youth centres plays a role in, if you are a parent, you're doing two jobs and your kid might be out on road because there isn't a youth club.
These youth clubs would help make things better. I'm not denying that. But the point is this: life is about choices. Life is about choices. Things happen. So, without, sort of bringing somebody's life and let's dissect it and go into it, we are going to go around in circles. But at the end of the day, life is about choices. I'll make another point. There was this boy who was in a hospital somewhere in Southampton who needed proton beam therapy or something along those lines, and the hospital wouldn't give it. The parents took him and ran away from the hospital, and they put him on an European wanted list, who then popped up in Spain, and then they made a YouTube video explaining why they had to take him and run away from the hospital. That story was in the news. I think his name was Asha or something like that. Now, this is a parent who knew that they literally risked it all to get their son the treatment they felt he needed. They were put on the European arrest warrant, which would have really turned out badly for them had they not put their story out, and then the political, should I say, climate changed around them. So life is about choices. There may be extreme choices, but they are choices. Now, if you like, turn it up a bit. There was this lady in Greenwich whom the daughter had asthma or something along those lines. She was in the news recently. The daughter, I think she eventually died. And the argument was that the toxic smoke because they lived close to a road. And I thought to myself, this is your child. You live close to a road. You know the fumes from these cars are killing this child. Why do you still live there?
Where is she meant to go?
So I think the issue that ladies had, maybe with the point you made about choices and being a single parent mother, was that it's a choice. Is it always a choice?
I would say a lot of them are a choice. A lot are a choice. I would say. I mean, again, if we start going into it, you find that. I would say.
Go into it.
No, please put it all out there. I really want to hear how I made my choice. School me, please.
Because the ropes are there and you're on right now. So let's just.
School me, please, about my choice.
People would always say, I don't know, I was in love or whatnot, and then it turned out badly. That was sort of the narrative we have. But then I've had situations where you see a single mom and she tells you, the dad of the child has XYZ children with XYZ number of women. And how did you not know that?
How should she know that? She doesn't always know that. I looked after a woman who had children. She had about 5 kids with somebody. Now, in this case, I would say there's a definite level of irresponsibility on her part because she didn't know where the guy lived, nothing, yeah? But not everything is the person's fault. If you're living with someone and you think that you have a good relationship with them, but they've kept stuff from you.
But I don't know where he lives and has a good relationship with him.
I don't know at what point
Because
she
men are
kicked
so
him out and
transparent.
then whatever. But what I'm trying to say is that you cannot blame, especially it's not fair to keep on blaming the woman because the men are either not taking responsibility or they want to take responsibility. It takes two people to make a relationship happen. And often it is our women who are left to look after the children on their own. Do you know what housing situation in London is like? People be on the housing list and be at like 2,000 on the waiting list. So what is she supposed to do? Because you've just said that she is a single mom, she needs to make the choice to be there for her kids. So that means that she might not be able to get the work that she needs to do. So she might be reliant on benefits, including housing benefits. So she doesn't have money for a deposit to just go and move somewhere else. Her family might be in another country or elsewhere. Like if they're in the north of this country, for example, they do not understand having to pay £1,000 for a 2-bedroom flat for each month. They don't understand that, and they don't have that kind of money either.
But
so she doesn't have a
you made the choice to come to London. This is the thing.
Okay, so let me introduce you to
appear
some
in London.
women who've made some choices around single parenting. So, as I said, I grew up in the Northeast and I spent part of my life in the care system, and I'll tell you why. So my carer was an elderly white woman who grew up in a violent relationship. She was a mother of 5. She made the choice to leave that man, which meant she was a single parent. And she made some money by fostering children. My mum became a single parent because my father left her. So what was her choice in that? Let me continue. Some men choose to not take up the responsibility for being a father at that time. There are lots of nuances around single parenting, but it is not always the woman's fault. And I think actually if you focus more on the successors, Barack Obama, who was raised within a single parent family, you focus more on that and not the negative aspect that you somehow have managed to get yourself into this situation. You are living by a road. Why do you not move? Move where? If you are living in poverty, where exactly are you going to move to? Let's not be so simplistic.
So let me just move it forward now, so widen it to where government can, on that point. If there's a scenario where a black mother or a black father needs a bit of support in raising their child, i.e. they're living somewhere that isn't conducive to a healthy lifestyle for them and their child, does the government play a role in supporting our community more so in those kind of situations? Or do you think that government, we know there's racism in this country, or we dump to there is racism in this country, but is that not a situation kind of leaning to what, as you were saying, where you've got to take responsibility for your child to make sure they don't have a situation where they're unhealthy and they die of asthma? Or can government do more to help our community?
I think if we come from the point that parents take responsibility for their children, no parent, I think, wakes up wanting to not take care of their own. You want to do that. I think, yes, the government should support, like I was talking about earlier, Sure Start, which was designed to help people in economically disadvantaged communities to stay together as families. That money has been taken away, and there is a 4% increase in the number of children that are going into the care system. So I think there is a correlation between investment into initiatives and community groups that can better serve people from the Black community that are specifically, I'd not say designed, but set up to address issues that are pertinent to our culture. If you don't help to support that, whether it's Black people doing that for ourselves and investing in that, or the government, then people are going to slip through the net. So it's that community effect that you were talking about earlier. It comes, I think, in both parts. But yes, there's always an element of responsibility, but I prefer not to err on the side of judgment and just come from the perspective that every mother, every father wants the best for their child, and they are struggling to achieve that.
Just quickly as we go.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the government has a benefit system, and you apply for it. I'm not aware of any benefits that is specifically for white people or Indians or whatever else. It's a box standard system. You apply for it. If you fit, you get it. So I'm not sure where all this, withdrawing funds from the community is coming from.
It's a reality. It's happened.
That's a fact.
That's a fact.
That they've withdrawn. Hold on. It's a fact that the government has said these funds that is targeted at Black community were withdrawn.
No, it wasn't for the Black community. It's for people who are already in vulnerable socio-economic situations, which, unfortunately, there is a high proportion of Black and other ethnic minority people in that group. So when we withdraw the funds, it does directly affect our communities.
Yes, but at the end of the day, they did not target, there were no allocation of funds for black people. There are other poor white...
No, but they fall into that group.
There are other poor white communities outside London, let's not forget that. So if they withdraw it and it affects everybody all along. So again, it comes back to responsibility. Now, I'm not saying that every relationship breakup is the woman's fault. But let me make the point. But at the end of the day, like they say, who is left holding the baby?
But who's doing
Hold on.
So you're saying that because the woman ends up holding the baby, she needs to be better in her decision making.
She should be more. But she is. Hold on. There is no racism. There should be no racism in the world, but there is. That's the fact. Not the ideal. This is the fact.
You're focusing on the negative side of the stereotypes, because on the whole, if you look even at this room that we're in now, it is full of black men who are doing something really positive with their lives. I'm so proud to be here. And that means that there's so many mothers, whether they're raised by single mothers or in two-parent households, but there's so many single black mothers and other mothers of other ethnic backgrounds who are doing a fantastic job. And that is the reason why it is a negative stereotype, because on the whole, our men are doing well, and they might just be at the standard Joe, like regular Joe kind of position, and not celebrities or making like loads and loads of money. But the fact is that we are still being fed this image and believe in this image that on the whole, that we are not doing well, that it's the fault of single mothers because they're living in poverty and not doing... Most single mothers are living in poverty. They are struggling. They're working more than one job, but they are still managing to pour in good stuff to their children to make them...
Most of the people on benefits are from two-parent families, and it's because of a lack of income, or working families. The people that are claiming benefits are working families. So this idea that it's that we're somehow, kind of sitting in our poverty and loving it is not right. You're digesting the myth. You're digesting it.
I've just got to wrap, but just finally, Azu, just because I know that you've lived in Africa and in Nigeria, what are the differences in how the black communities in Africa manage to kind of function and thrive without governments that do what governments do in this country?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. First of all, most people don't sit around feeling sorry for themselves to start off with. Most people don't. Do you know what I mean? Now, it sounds very bad, but you see loads of people trying to cross the Mediterranean, the desert, coming here illegally and so on and so forth. And some of them risking their lives. But at the end of the day, the driving desire is to better themselves. Nobody in England has had to cross a desert to better their life. You don't have to. So would you say
that the government in this country, although they're not our best friends, they still do a lot more than the governments from our own country back in the Caribbean and Africa?
I mean, you can ask anyone. And I really hate to say this, but you probably get treated better in England with the racism than you get treated back in Africa, and I would say Nigeria. Let me not speak so much about the Caribbean, even though I hear it's not that great. But I don't want to go into that because I've not been there. But in Africa, you probably get a better treatment here than you would get in Nigeria. To prove the fact, when the news broke in Libya about the black people who were being sold, and I'm talking about in 2016, 17 or so, it was on the news. How many African governments bothered? We are supposed to be all upset about slavery when we couldn't do anything about it. In 2017, you had Nigeria with its massive army. They didn't do anything. They sat down there and said, we didn't ask you to cross the desert. That was the government's response. So how then do we get the moral courage to be upset about racism when they were being sold in your background, in your backyard? You could do something about it and did nothing.
I've got to wrap there, guys.
And it fell, quickly, and it fell to Samuel Eto'o. Just briefly. A very quick point. And it fell to Samuel Eto'o to go to Libya to hire a plane to negotiate and get his people from Cameroon back. But that was a footballer, not the government.
I hear that. Listen, Azu, Arid, and Shri, cheers for coming on the show this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel here on Blakademik TV. All of our socials across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our website as well, blakademik.com. Till next time, peace. If you enjoyed that video, guys, we have plenty more content here. Go check it out right now. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell right there. Go and click it right now.